What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
And we're here with co-host of System of Systems podcast and a Twink Rev contributor, Ben. Welcome.
Thanks so much, guys, for having me. This is a real treat on a Thursday night.
So people have probably seen a couple of your articles that appeared on twinkrev.com, under which you publish under the Perpetual Self-Optimizer, I believe, right?
That's right.
Yeah, which is a great name, which we will ask about that too. But
For
first,
sure.
Yeah, first wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about what is System of Systems?
So System of Systems is a podcast that I co-host with Adam Lehrer, who's an artist and a cultural critic. And, basically we try to talk about art in a non-dogmatic way. And we like to kind of interview our favorite kind of artists and our favorite kind of critics, anybody who's really doing anything interesting in the kind of like the dead zone of like art and culture right now. So we talk to writers, to all kinds of creative people. And, Adam is kind of like the brains behind the podcast. He writes all the show notes. I'm kind of like the useless, like technocratic bug who edits the podcast afterwards and has very little of value to say. But no, it's something that we've been kind of doing these past couple months, and it's still going strong. And it's the first time I've ever done like an audio based project like this. So it's pretty cool, and everybody should check it out.
Yeah, no, it is. You had River on, right?
That's right. We had River on a couple of weeks ago. That was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, and it was a really great episode. And so, how did you get into this art criticism world in the gray nether regions, the soft moist nether regions of art? What drew you to all that?
Oh man, well, I basically went to like successive like public art magnet schools. So I went to like an art middle school and then an art high school, and I studied film in high school. And that's kind of where it all began. And I started, reading nonfiction. I started, with like Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn. And it just, like that's kind of the starting place for every burgeoning lefty kind of high schooler. But yeah, I mean, it's always, kind of been a passion of mine. And I think, I don't know, I've always felt a kind of, not a resentment, but a just kind of general discomfort with like not necessarily my peers, because like everybody I've ever, worked with has generally been a great person, but, just the kind of environment that the art scene of recent years has kind of fostered. And obviously this is nothing new, but it does tend to be a very kind of totalitarian place in terms of, the things you can depict and portray and say and all kinds of stuff. So, Adam and I had kind of similar ideas, and obviously we met on Twitter because we met during a pandemic. But I think it all just kind of worked out that way. But I've always kind of had an interest in art, and then it just kind of grew into an interest of culture organically.
Were you surprised with the recent, I think it was last week, art controversy that blew on Twitter? Everyone has opinions now about art.
God.
It's like
capitalist art versus socialist art.
Yeah.
Like abstract expressionism.
Yeah.
The authoritative take there.
I actually found Eric Arbor's tweet to be kind of a piece of art unto itself. Like it just the kind of discourse it attracted was just stunning and spectacular. It's like, holy shit, these people are talking about things that, like, I don't know, you just kind of talk about in an elementary art criticism or art class, but it's great. Like I saw that Vaush tweeted something in return.
Yep.
I saw all kinds of pushback and also support. I mean, I won't weigh in on my own opinion because I feel like it's too pristine to be left as it is. But I thought it was fantastic. Yeah.
So like, I guess like I kind of grew up with a healthy middle class appreciation for for art, but there is this whole second order world of like art criticism and the people who immerse themselves in this world and who get into like art Twitter fights over like who's canceled this week for not the snub they made at some gallery opening, or like just the most amazing sort of deep world. What do you sort of see as like the value of that sort of art and cultural criticism role?
I think because most of the function it actually serves right now is not, it doesn't have very much value, I'd say. Like I think, quite frankly, like so much of what goes on in the art and cultural criticism, kind of world right now is to just prop up a kind of homogenous ideology. People refer to it by all kinds of different names. You can call it liberalism or neoliberalism or however you want to characterize it. But I think, there's very little in terms of actual ideological dissent right now. And, in such a kind of like, ostensibly, free and open and, all of the values that supposedly our cultural sphere holds. And we'll get into this later, I'm sure, the causes of this, but it's just so surprising that it's such a kind of constricted atmosphere. I mean, I'm seeing movie reviews now, and this has been the case for a couple of years. I'm seeing movie reviews that kind of just hinge solely on the kind of representational power of the characters in terms of their racial and ethnic makeup and their sexual orientation. It's like, well, this is not at all incisive or insightful whatsoever. There's no actual consideration of the kind of transcendent quality that art is ostensibly supposed to have. It's just kind of like facile sloganeering half the time, and then the other half of the time it's just stupid. It's just jargon filled, and you could say influenced a little bit too much by the post-structuralists.
Well, that's I mean, I guess my next question is really around like the people who make their living making art these days. And I'm sure it's different, right? There are people churning out Marvel movies or whatever, and like busy having Hollywood pool parties where just future Me Too episodes are planned. But like there is also the people who particularly in like visual performing arts, maybe a lot of like modern classical music or whatever. Like there's a whole world of the people who kind of, it seems like a lot of bourgeois affectation from sort of looking in from the outside. And yet these people are sort of clearly have no money most of the time, right? At least like there's most artists are truly struggling artists. How do you sort of see that world operating? It's bizarre to me looking from the outside in.
I think a good way to characterize it would be that yes, these people are struggling, and they do have a kind of precarious existence in the sense that they don't really have the same prospects that like a 20 or 30-year-old would have had just maybe 5 decades ago, like just in terms of having a very foundational fundamental existence in terms of family life and having a stable job and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of the role that these artists and creatives play is being kind of on the underbelly of the kind of, it goes by a lot of names, the managerial elite, if you want to call it. I'm just fond of using the term elites because I think more or less people know what you're talking about, but it also opens up a kind of conversation with people who otherwise wouldn't be really familiar with it. But back to what I was saying, like they do kind of form the underbelly of this elite class, which, I mean, you could characterize them as knowledge workers, as doing abstract labor rather than traditional manual labor or service labor, who kind of do form and shape the ideological currents in the cultural sphere. And I know this might not be sufficiently materialist enough, but I do think these people, the artists and creatives, for as exploited and as precarious as their lives are, they do play a very useful function right now, which is to ensure that the creative output of kind of neoliberal culture or Western culture more broadly, the creative output of it does follow a fairly narrow and prescribed path, and it just it kind of includes all of the sacred cows of what you might call wokeness, or what you might call kind of just kind of intersectionality, or all of these different kind of words. And they toe the line, is what I'm trying to say. They toe the line for the elites, for the people who are kind of directly above them, who dictate what they can and can't say.
Well, and I mean, and given that either they're relying on like philanthropic structures, like arts funding is a bizarre world, right?
Yeah.
Or literally selling art to people who have a huge amount of disposable income to like. I'm reminded of we published a piece called Petit Bourgeois Feminism, Feminist Art, about Emily Hartley Scudder by J.J. Harper on Twinkrev. And that was just an eye-opener to me, because J.J. is very immersed in the New Zealand art world, which is not large, but it certainly has all the affectations of a larger country's art
I'm
scene.
Sure.
But I was not familiar with this New Zealand-born, but like I guess Brooklyn-based artist, and she does things like recovering a gynecological exam chair in like pink satin, and that's her her art. And I'm just like, the good art, bad art, argument is, aside from is this fucking cringe? And in this case, and yet this person's taken seriously, can access huge amounts of philanthropic or government arts funding, the taste of which is surely that of the capitalist class, like nakedly. I mean,
certainly, yeah.
It's not we're not the ones buying the $500,000 gynecological exam chair or whatever, reupholstered, freshly reupholstered.
Right. Or I can't remember. Oh, it was the banana taped to the wall that Sam shared in relation to Eric Arbor's post. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's kind of shocking, and maybe this is a good segue into my voting piece, because it's kind of shocking how intertwined these worlds are, and doing the most kind of fundamental research on what I opened the piece with, a discussion of the kind of climate clock that was unveiled in New York City a couple months ago. It was shocking to me that, like Bill de Blasio's Office of Climate Policy was credited as literally like a partner, not only like a funder, but also a partner. And I kind of made the point that this was a crossover between the state, the NGO nonprofit sphere, which is the organization Beautiful Rising, which does all of this kind of like, climate. I know, it's just gorgeous. They do all this climate activism all over the world. There are other climate clocks. There are ones that they want to put up elsewhere. Beautiful Rising, and also the, just the sphere of private capital, and this, this particular kind of a public installation was actually funded with Related Companies, which is a massive real estate firm in New York, and tremendously kind of spotted history, if you will, in terms of being like a literal kind of demonic real estate developing company.
Yeah, like you said, your piece is titled "Voting Like the World Depends on It." It has some really great points about how the capitalist class is kind of funding all these like weird niche issues around gender and race and climate change. That was all under Obama or a Trump era. So I'm wondering what the Biden era, what do you think the Biden era is going to look like for like this art thing? It's like, back then it was like, oh, it's trying to be counter to Trump. And now it's like, well, now they got their guy in. Like, is it just going to go to the right? Is the right going to be the new vanguard for like capitalist art? Like, what do you think?
Oh man, I think the fact that the left is already so entrenched in kind of, and I use the left as like the progressive liberal kind of left, is so entrenched in the kind of art world right now. I mean, they've already kind of won their place. That, I say the culture war has already been won. Like, this is not even a debate anymore. Like, there are no like reactionary artists making like reactionary art. It's all this kind of like homogenous liberal stuff. I honestly think either it's going to fade away a little bit just because there won't be those shocking headlines every month. Or Trump, if he establishes like his own news corporation of some sort, or if he finds a way to stay in the public eye, I think they're going to have even longer. They're just going to prolong the perpetual outrage cycle with him. And there's going to be even more Trump art. They're going to be calling for him to be tried at the Hague. They're going to be calling for him to be executed in the streets of Brooklyn. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I hope it dies away a little bit, because I think everybody is a little bit fatigued right now.
Well, it's funny. So your piece is wonderful, and I recommend everyone go read it, because it's a deep exploration of some of these concepts through the lens of things like the climate clock that went up, but it's funny, as you were mentioning the kind of that sort of entrenchment of that liberal left milieu into sort of art and culture. I was thinking of that fucking fearless girl statue they put up front of the on Wall Street. So Wall Street has the bull, right? And then so they put up the little girl statue, like with her hand out telling it to stop, which I believe was funded by a bunch of finance companies or something. It's not like,
I believe
it was basically a marketing gimmick. But is there a more perfect symbol than like a sort of finance company funding a statue that is a sort of a feminist, or interpreted as a feminist statement of like the market? Look at me standing up to what exactly? One section of the ruling class standing up to the other section of the ruling class. I love this.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, because it kind of illustrates a broader point that I was trying to make, which is that this is just the confluence of progressive social ideology and neoliberal capital. Like, I think the kind of dominant kind of cultural expression of these managerial elites, who do comprise largely the kind of governing apparatus in Democrat-controlled cities, but also the kind of heads of the NGO sphere, which is a ginormous chunk of the GDP. I mean, it's a humongous kind of sphere which nobody really pays attention to in terms of their power, but also just the worlds of art and culture generally. And this is basically like the contemporary expression of our elites. And I think a lot of people who are dismissive of the kind of, the focus on culture and the focus on these kind of like social battles, what they don't realize when they say like, oh, you're focusing too much on the culture war and you're not insufficiently, you're paying insufficient attention to class. It is a class war of sorts, because at the end of the day, what these cultural projects are intent on doing is further atomizing people and further making people kind of put themselves into these differing camps based on their ascriptive identity categories. It has nothing to do with any kind of genuine empowerment or any kind of like lifting of the spirit or any heady utopian vision. It always has to do with further atomizing people, and at the end of the day, like it does filter down to the kind of underclass, to the working class and the middle class too. And that's what I think a lot of people on the left don't realize, is that this cultural kind of assault is a class assault, and it does have genuine consequences in terms of building any kind of cogent class movement. And to say like, oh, all you need to do is just not talk about the culture war and just talk about class. Well, that's like, if you're in a room with a serial killer and you close your eyes, that's not going to do anything to prevent yourself being murdered. They're going to be, churning this shit out for decades to come. And, it should be in anyone's interest who has any kind of inkling of, we need to build some kind of, working class force to better anybody in this country. It should be in your interest to fight against this kind of cultural assault and to draw attention to its inconsistencies and to its contradictions fundamentally, because at the end of the day, it's riddled with those if you look.
Yeah, I think the kind of class war narrative really in your piece shows how all of these art performances and narratives and like PR campaigns are all like giant propaganda like aspects, like attack the masses and like blame them for like climate change, like, oh, you individually must change your behaviors or you're bad. But it doesn't seem like a lot of the broad left liberals see it as propaganda. They see it as like goodwill or like just like another commodity like being produced. They don't see it as like the upper classes attacking the lower classes through
yeah, no, that's totally correct. I mean, I think part of the reason for that is because the kind of progressive left, or the left liberals, whatever you want to call them, are already part of the greater Democratic Party apparatus. And I think at the end of the day, like one thing that I kind of wanted to draw attention to in the piece is that all of these seemingly kind of disparate social movements that are focusing on environmental kind of destruction or gender stuff or race stuff, at the end of the day, they're all under the broader umbrella of the Democratic Party. Really, there's no escaping its influence wherever you go. And they're not there to serve any other function in terms of actual material, tangible electoral power. They're not, we don't have a socialist party in this country that's channeling any of that. We have the Democratic Party, which, obviously has never purported to be any kind of socialist or working class party. And these people are towing the line for them at every step. I mean, to be invested in these things to the extent and to the ends that these actors are, and I'm speaking specifically of, the artists who are kind of opportunistically invested in projects like these. I think they're just useful dupes for the Democratic Party. I think many of them know that, and they're constantly posting about it on social media. I won't name any names, but but some of them are pretending that, they're like, oh, I'm voting for the Democrat because he's lesser evil, but I'm also doing all of these other things. And you look at everything else they're doing, and at the end of the day, it's in service of the Democrat kind of project more broadly. So there's no really escaping the influence if you're going to be perusing these spheres.
Yeah, it seems like also a lot of these people who do this kind of propaganda have intercepted so much of even the more like leftish groups, like even like DSA, like Molly Crabapple, who's like funded by like a State Department organization. Her whole thing is art. Her thing is art, and it was all propaganda for like the Syrian war. But she's considered like a socialist icon in America. It's just very funny that no one sees these like contradictions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just to kind of close out this point, I'll draw from a specific example I talked about in the article, which was that OR Books, which was one of the kind of publishers in the broad kind of Bernie movement of 2016 and 2020. They're actually the official publishing partner of Beautiful Rising, who obviously is the aforementioned activist. They call themselves like an activist conglomerate of some sort, an activist collective.
And not a euphemism for like an attractive boner.
Yeah, no, absolutely no. It's wholly unattractive. It's pretty repulsive. But they're actually the publishers of Beautiful Rising, and they also happen to publish Nathan J. Robinson's book about Trump called American Monstrosity, I think. So it goes to show that the links between these organizations are not illusory they're not like some kind of conspiracy. They're right in front of you if you actually do the research. I mean, all I did really was click through the Climate Clock website and go to their About page and just look at some of the names of who they were affiliated with. And I was like, wow, this is a really convenient thing because I have my whole article right here in front of me.
Well, I mean, and it's sort of always fascinating. I think the kind of American left, as much as it's mostly been inhabited by left liberals who are, really, they are left, but they're fucking liberals. it being so small and so pathetic and anemic has meant that it everything becomes big tent. And so you can just smuggle the shit in. It's not even smuggling. You can walk in through the front of the goddamn big tent, clutching Wells Fargo in hand, as long as you have given the appropriate signifiers. Those signifiers being literally like a concern over whatever the sort of culture issue war of the day is, right? You're like, oh, look, it's okay. I put up a I put up a Black Lives Matter sign in my lawn of my mansion, and now I'm a leftist. Like,
right?
Yay me. Yeah, I think we need more gatekeeping on the left, but only for like rich weirdos, not like.
In a sense, yeah. I mean, I agree with you to the extent that this definitely has been the trend that the left has been moving in recent years. But I'd say that like this stuff just started in the 60s, man. That's where the kind of heyday of this kind of compulsive radicalism and this genuine kind of hatred of all that is ordinary or boring or not radical, right? Kind of came about with organizations like the Students for a Democratic Society, who literally proclaimed that America was a disgusting settler colonial state that was beyond repair. It's like, okay, I mean, if you're going to do politics to try to fix working people's lives here, and you proclaim the entire thing corrupt, it's like, okay, what work do you have to do? None, right? So but like, I mean, I'd say that I think the left as it exists, and this is a kind of point I make on my Twitter a lot, like the left as it exists, not as it aspires. It's important to realize the kind of place it's in right now and the kind of real kind of like corrosive stuff that it's been peddling in terms of functioning as kind of convenient operators for these elite bourgeois interests. And I really personally, I'm not one for prescriptions right now, A, because I'm an idiot, but also B, because I really I think very few people know better right now, have a real kind of cogent solution. And I think many people on the left are very much focused on just advancing the kind of theories that worked 100 years ago and advancing certain ideologies that are pretty much long dead in terms of the American populace. I mean, this is something I say a lot, but there are more petty bourgeois Marxists right now than there are workers committed to a Marxist cause in America. There are probably more journals of Marxist thought based in New York than there are Marxist workers in Alabama. So it's just like, I think we should be kind of engaging in a genuinely intellectually generative project right now, because people who are interested in genuine working class emancipation don't really have control. And unfortunately, the left as it exists right now is not for working class emancipation, but they have a lot of influence and a lot of control, a lot more than, people might think. And I think, it should be a time for real kind of critique and real kind of generative thinking and just philosophizing in a sense, in a very basic way of saying, okay, what can we do with the conditions that are present right now? And, it's important to have a sense of kind of historicity and the failures of the left post 60s, because I think very few people have come to terms with how that project has gone, and it's a pretty bad it's in a pretty bad place.
Well, and it ends up being as you mentioned before, right? It's sort of perfect at sheepdogging people back into the Democratic Party for one,
right.
But also isn't it interesting that sort of all of the reflexes learned by the sort of modern left and resurgent Marxist left, for example, even or socialist left, perhaps. But have all been their habits learned from the 60s new left and what
right.
Caleb Maupin, I think, calls the synthetic left, or that.
Oh yeah, Angela Nagel and Michael Tracy too. I think they.
Yeah, I can't remember.
They call it the fusionist left. Yeah, same idea though.
Yeah, but isn't it kind of interesting how all those habits and reflexes always result in sort of like something must be done, and that something always ends up being sell a tote bag, emergency banner drop action. It's like anything that hasn't worked before, that's what is most urgent to do, and never to actually stop and analyze. And so it's not just that, yes, there's a bunch of people in New York or whatever, or San Francisco, as the case may be, sort of espousing Marxist analysis. It's the people who are not applying the Marxist analysis and actually being good materialists and saying, gee, by applying this framework to our current conditions, maybe we can analyze it and figure out what should be done. Versus like, fuck it, go to like better do another march. Like just I'm just going to yell about a general strike on Twitter for half a day, and then I have done the work. I'm It's done. Great. We win.
Yeah.
We're winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marx himself is a great example of this, an illustration of what it means to be an actual kind of critical thinker and an actual kind of really just sharp kind of critic of your time. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, look at the way he eviscerated Proudhon and Stirner and even Hegel to some extent. Like, he was just vicious with them. If you read the German ideology, he calls, Max Stirner Saint Max, like this degenerate kind of individualist, nihilist figure who's interested in, this kind of like a narcissistic bourgeois project. But yeah, I mean, like, I'd even say that, like, look, like, the power that I have is very little. The power that any of us have individually is very little. And right now, I think there can be a lot of genuine disruption in terms of, actually entering the cultural sphere and making something generative that actually punctures the hegemony a little bit, that challenges the dominant narratives of kind of the neoliberal / progressive cultural project. And I think there's a lot of value in that. I mean, if you look at, like even podcasts like yours, like the Perfume Nationalists, like Barrett Avner's Contain podcast, there are so many people right now who are making really, really kind of incisive and artful commentary that I think is drawing more and more people into this realization that, like, fuck, like, everything is fucked, but at the, like, I don't have to feel bad about it. I think one of the primary things that I'm interested in is making people realize that, like, you don't have to feel guilty about structural racism or climate change or like, I don't know, cis heteronormativity or something like that. Like, this is not really up to you or any individual. And like I say in the piece, these are kind of spectral, abstract social dynamics that are dangled in front of people as a bludgeon, in a sense, as a way to kind of make them feel guilty for sins that they haven't committed. And at the end of the day, like in the article, I talk about that Uber ad that was like, oh, delete Uber if you tolerate racism. And if you look at the flip side of that, the implicit thing is, oh, if you're a racist and you're using Uber, you're, like, if you're necessarily doing anti-racist work by using Uber, which is the absurd fucking thing to me about all of these discourses is, like, I mean, if you think of even the notion of platforms like Twitter and Facebook banning their users as if they don't want you to use the platforms. I mean, these ostensibly you have a market product that you want to be used and bought and sold, and you're banning people from using it and buying it and selling it. So at the end of the day, like, the way these dynamics work is an extremely vicious and brutal attack on I think people's kind of psyches and their interiority, what Byung-Chul Han calls psychopolitics. It's doing psychopolitics. So yeah, I mean, I think it just goes way deeper than people realize. And I think there is a lot of value in just talking to normal people who have kind of, picked up on whiffs of these things, people who might be offline and not really connected to the ever churning discourse machine, and just talking to them and being like, what do you think about this critical race theory thing? What do you think about, all of these issues that you hear about on CNN or even Fox or whatever? Just, talk to people about these things. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't think anybody's like personally guilty if they haven't done anything like outside of like their normal everyday functioning. Nobody's personally guilty for destroying the planet. That's what these people want to make you feel, and you should fight against that. You should actively resist that and say, it's your
for being
fault.
Alive, sorry for being born. I never
sorry
asked
for
to be
using
born.
that plastic bag.
So you have another very good piece that's on the Twink Rev website. Your first piece on OnlyFans and a taxonomy of eros. But you don't take the feminist like approach, which a lot of people do, of like it's an anti-feminist like industry. Did you want to explain a little bit of like what the thesis of that piece is? Yeah,
so first off, I didn't use the feminist approach because feminism is a bourgeois mystification. No, I'm just kidding. No, the jokes aside, the kind of primary purpose of that piece was just a kind of fundamental cataloging of what OnlyFans actually represents in terms of its philosophical kind of function, in terms of the way that it affects us on an affective level, in terms of our emotionality, in terms of the way we even conceive of love and eros in the first place, and the way in which it's incredibly kind of destructive and corrosive to kind of authentic, the authentic erotic, the erotic other, the otherness that that defines what a healthy kind of erotic relationship should be in the first place. And I'm using all of this jargon, which is borrowed from a great kind of German/Korean philosopher named Byung-Chul Han, because I think it's perfect for describing sites like OnlyFans. And I mean, I could go on, but that's just the kind of gist of it. Like,
so I mean, the piece kind of I think touches on the kind of the parasocial relations, right? These are one-way social relationships that have all the trappings and the structure of what would be an intimate relationship,
right?
And then it leans on this so heavily. So in the spirit of that, could you drop your OnlyFans? Like, what's your? No, I'm sorry. But I mean, it is kind of interesting, right? There's something different in kind, right? Presumably, even just the classic porn industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like buying videotapes while wearing a trench coat or whatever.
Right.
That's different. People understand there's some separation between themselves and the performer. OnlyFans is I think, if I'm summarizing you well, in terms
no, you're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that collapsing of that relation does something different? So what is it doing different there?
Right. So that's a great characterization. No, I mean, basically the way it functions differently is that it in fact goes even beyond parasociality, because at the end of the day, parasociality resides on a generative fantastical element, right? When you're watching somebody in a film, not even in a porn, because it's weird to talk about that shit, but in a film, I wrote a whole article about it, but it's still weird. No, but in a film, like when you form like a particular parasocial relationship, or when you're reading a novel or something,
or listening to a podcast with your two favorite podcasters who are your best friends.
Exactly. Yes. And their names are Sam and Gian.
Yeah.
No, but when you're forming those kinds of relationships, they do still rely on the generative realm of fantasy in your mind, right? You're forming a fictional bond. Essentially, what's a fictional bond? And at the end of the day, it doesn't have the same stakes as a normal, regular relationship, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship. So what OnlyFans does in relation to traditional digital porn, which is, streamed on porn sites, all the names, right? Everybody knows the names, is that it collapses those barriers of parasociality, of actual generative thinking. And essentially what it offers you is a simulated kind of relationship with another living, breathing human being. And essentially, I think what that does is it basically it turns economic exchange, which is traditionally something that's done in the physical sphere, where you're kind of buying and selling products in person or online or whatever. What it does is turns economic exchange into something affective that's reliant on somebody's kind of interior emotions and their most kind of their deepest and most obscure kind of sexual drives. And at the end of the day, it sells you back those desires in a just compulsively kind of consumable format, which is, I mean, literally, like they have a feature called, pay-per-view messaging, where you can request of one of the kind of OnlyFans creators, you can request of them that they do a particular act, or they send you a particular image or pose or whatever. And something about that to me is just so sickening and so kind of fundamentally perverted and corrupt, because at the end of the day, people like this is just another avenue by which people are atomized even further and even further, because they don't have the same I'll say they don't require the same kind of skill set and the same kind of social affability that they otherwise would in an environment where this is not afforded to them. Meaning that literally, like, people are losing the capacity to talk to one another. People are fundamentally more and more alienated, especially in the context of a lockdown. And OnlyFans saw its profits rise massively in this lockdown. And this is just something that I was kind of drawn to writing about, because I'm interested in these questions of alienation in the first place, and how these extremely parasitic platforms like OnlyFans, I mean, not only how they advance this kind of exploitative model, this incredibly not only emotionally exploitative, but on the creators themselves, because they have to be always logged in, always cognizant of what their quote unquote fans are desiring and asking of them, and always kind of communicating with the fans. Like they're being exploited in a very fundamental way, but it's under the auspice of some liberationist kind of sex work that we should elevate the voices of. We should kind of, and again, like, I know you guys have had people who are much more like kind of sharply critical and have much better critiques of this stuff than I do from a feminist lens, like Esperanza, for example, of the kind of sex trade and the sex work industry. But yeah, it's just incredibly corrosive on all levels. And this is one of the kind of basic things that I wanted to talk about in this article, just the commodification of human interiority and the kind of like the destruction of authentic erotic connectivity, which is I think, like, if we go the direction of Japan, for instance, which already has these prosthetic hands you can hold as you're walking to simulate that you're walking with somebody. They have like sex robots and shit. If we keep going down this path, it's going to be really fucked in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, there seems, since your article was written, so it was kind of when the rise of OnlyFans was occurring in society, there's been like a rapid normalization of like everyone creating porn, because now you have like celebrities doing it, YouTubers, like every hot guy on Twitter and Instagram, like they all have OnlyFans now. Like,
right. Where
do you think it's going to go from here? Like, what is this? Do you have any ideas of like what else will have an impact on society? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
I think AOC is probably going to make one within like 2 or 3 years.
Isn't that what Trump's doing after he leaves office? Sure.
Oh my God.
Oh God, I hope so.
Donald
I think
Trump,
that would
top
be
percent, top 1% of OnlyFans.
I'd subscribe just out of interest.
Me too.
But no, I mean, I mean, the only place I see this going, I mean, not to be too hyperbolic or too just demure, but the only place I see this going is just an increased kind of alienated existence for most ordinary people. And I think as the OnlyFans kind of phenomenon has been popularized, it plays with what traditionally is conceived to be a healthy kind of social relationship. And obviously, like, this goes for I mean, we all make money from Patreon. Let's be real, but it goes to all of these kind of subscription-based platforms that I mean, I think OnlyFans is for sure the most corrosive example of this. But it goes, it speaks of the kind of subscription-based platforms that they've been booming in recent years, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's kind of indicative of broader cultural trends of social decay and the destruction of the public square and the kind of individualization of consumption that people like Mark Fisher talked about when he talked about flexible capitalism, post-Fordism. We no longer have this kind of economy based on physical production. We have a massive sector of precarious service people who might wait tables in the daytime, but during the night they're doing OnlyFans stuff, or they're streaming on Twitch, or they're doing kind of a Patreon podcast, and they're building this kind of parasocial connection with their Twitter followers. And so I just kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit, and to just examine the kind of stakes involved, because I think when you have like public opinion online that's totally in the kind of going to bat for these platforms like OnlyFans. I mean, for example, like you see, I mean, like, I won't even comment on the whole sex work is work kind of slogan. I'll just say that like 99 times out of 100, that sex work is work slogan is used to justify the existence of OnlyFans and to legitimize it in the eyes of many people, not only online, but in real life too, who otherwise have no idea of how OnlyFans functions and how truly parasitic it is. And just for the human spirit, I know I'm not the best materialist. I do believe in all of these silly, transcendent, kind of immaterial things. But I mean, it really is a kind of like social death that we're witnessing. And I'm very, very kind of concerned about that.
Well, I think I certainly agree. And I think what people do is, because that critique is one that could be levied by a kind of censorious social conservative, right? Simply like, there's tits and dicks and oh my, this, therefore it's bad, right? That this is
Right.
not the critique being offered. The critique, I mean, for one, I think the part that I found most repulsive about the kind of OnlyFans discourse was early on. I think, maybe the first like 2 or 3 months of lockdowns, pandemic, when the herding was really hitting, right? And stimulus was not sufficient, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the goddamn story. But where the triumphant sort of stories of personal liberation through OnlyFans were coming out. And there were people who literally sort of just seemed to regard something like OnlyFans as the kind of like the welfare state in the private hands. I mean, this is your social safety net now, is just show your pussy on the internet, and like now you're like, you have no right to expect more, and we should all applaud that we've reached this state of affairs.
Right.
What the actual fuck? Like, where have we arrived? And that's even a side point to the one you made, which is quite correct, which is, what is it doing to the people watching it?
Right. I mean, I think you brought up a great point in terms of the basic kind of transference of kind of the obligation that the elites used to have to the citizens of its country. I think Lash talks about this really well in The Revolt of the Elites and the Betrayal of Democracy. He talks about the kind of the growth of this kind of post-Fordist managerial elite as coinciding with this kind of degrowth in the sphere of kind of public services. They no longer have an obligation to fund public services because they're only interested in funding their own kind of communities, their own kind of cultural projects, basically their own narcissism. He talks about the elites kind of mimicking the old aristocracy, but leaving behind the virtues of it and only taking the vices. So, I mean, you could make an argument that the old aristocracy, the old bourgeois order, the kind of modernist traditional bourgeoisie, they did invest in public works projects in a sense, like, I mean, if you look at the Cathedral of Learning in Pittsburgh, that was all kind of Andrew Carnegie's money, or, the kind of like, yes, blood-drenched Rockefellers, they still built, these great kind of, big buildings and these big kind of, public works. At the end of the day, our elites are only interested in destroying us through these kind of precarity market mechanisms. They're only interested in kind of a narcissistic and self-serving ideological project, which they, like I said, they bludgeon us with all of their kind of, elite kind of cultural preoccupations. And I mean, like, I know I probably sound really histrionic here. I didn't mean to come across histrionic, but at the end of the day, like, this shit is really fucked. And I don't see any, like, I mean, I do see like a focus on it within my sphere of Twitter, but in the broader kind of ostensibly class focused kind of not only left and the right too. I mean, the right's caught up in all of this stuff too. And I personally don't really even consider myself a leftist anymore in the traditional sense. And I would totally be down with a kind of like, old left style, genuine kind of class politics. But I just don't see, any of that kind of energy in the camp that's supposed to be channeling it. I mean, and at the end of the day, like, if they really did take that kind of class first perspective, it would be better. But they're really doing the work for the elites. Like they're kind of, tugging the boat along for them, just in terms of legitimizing these narratives in the discourse. And, just kind of like justifying these incredibly culturally destructive things. I mean, not to be too socially conservative about it, but I think there is value in a kind of traditional marital relationship, whether it's between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or, cis, trans, whatever you want. I don't care. But at the end of the day, I think there is an extremely kind of valuable thing about the familial structure. And I tend to agree with the Catholic distributists like G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc, that the kind of family structure is the kind of central kind of social unit, the most fundamental social unit of society. And I know you guys might disagree with that, but that's just my kind of
I know we're strict family abolitionists on this podcast. Well, I mean, you sort of touched there upon, I think, the other part of this, right, is exactly what you're saying. I mean, the eros, I mean, the truly erotic, and the fact that it requires an actual separation from one or more other people, whatever you're into. But the purely from a sort of like, put it this way, I want our dear listeners to have great sex. I want them to have fulfilling, good, erotic relationships. I want them to fuck good. And it's got to be said that there's a sort of a preoccupation with the as you say, that sort of extended parasocial version of this and this commodified version of this. It's just like it's tapping directly into like your reptile brainstem about like it's just kind of already too much.
Yeah.
And because it's tapping every sort of emotional fiber you can. And then it's made nastier by the fact that it's a giant corporation that is operating under the cover of a kind of social justice rhetoric, right? Of personal liberation, of women's empowerment, particularly of sex worker rights, all of which could be very good things on their own. But when they are literally just air cover for, like, there's a bunch of like 22-year-old product managers at OnlyFans right now tweaking the dials on how do we squirt that extra little bit of fucking dopamine into your brain every time you get a message back from a creator and get you to swipe that credit card again. Like, that shit's sick, right? I mean, it's a sign of a sick culture. But it's not sick because it's sex. It's sick because it's capital.
It's sick because it's not sex. That's kind of the point of it's the very opposite of what kind of authentic kind of erotic connection is. But no, like, to your point, I think that's a great thing to bring up, because it goes to show the kind of moral pervertedness of the classic libertarian view of how people function in markets. Like, oh, we're all rational actors and we make rational choices. It's like, motherfucker, if you look at the entire structure of advertisement itself, it's, it might not be as probing and as intense as the kind of brainstem assault that OnlyFans give you, but it is a genuine kind of like a way to make you behave irrationally, precisely because the capitalist class wants you to, and the capitalist class wants you to consume. And I think OnlyFans, goes to show the kind of limitations of that kind of libertarian worldview even further, because at the end of the day, like, you're not making a really rational choice in any regard here. You're making a choice based on your, how aroused you are, literally how fucking turned on you are by a particular, creator or whatever. And I think in terms of the way that sex operates, I think this is something that people can agree about generally and broadly, is that it does require a certain degree of detachment, in a sense, because without that erotic distance, you don't have any of the mystery that drives, any of the tension that drives an erotic relationship in the first place.
No, it's masturbatory at that point.
Exactly. It totally denies the aspect of what it even means to have a real kind of erotic relationship. It denies that otherness, and that's a term I borrow from Byung-Chul Han again, because he's so useful for this stuff. It denies that otherness to people, and I think that otherness is just a kind of fundamental like aspect of having a healthy sexual relationship in the first place. That mystery, that fundamental, the divinity of the erotic connection must be like separate. It can't always be this totally transparent thing where you literally have erotic vindication at every moment, because that just turns you into an erotic consumer, not an erotic being.
You have to permit me the classic Twink Rev Lacan bit, which is I'm looking for big other. But it's interesting, the point you made about the kind of libertarian market logic is, I think Sam has made the point several times, right, about coming from the libertarian world, that the wholesale import of those libertarian kind of ideas into the left is the sickness. I mean, it's the rise of libertarianism in the 60s, and it's sort of and the kind of the victory of the new left was a libertarian left, and it's libertarian in the sense of like Ron Paul libertarianism.
And I mean, Rothbard, like the most fucking demonic Chicago school boys, like just the most satanic kind of Hayekian like creeps you'll ever see and you'll ever meet. Like, no offense, Sam, to your past self. I don't want to.
Offend him, roast him.
I mean, I'm very glad that many people in the contemporary right have turned against this and have actually taken on a class project that's not just laissez-faire fetishism, that's not just fucking creepy Chicago school shit, that's actually like, principled and dignified in a sense. And I wouldn't consider myself to be on the right in any regard, but it's just interesting to see these dynamics develop now. And I think, as we talked about in our episode with River, I think there is a kind of realignment happening in a sense. And I'm seeing, people who not in a million years I'd consider, like a couple years ago, I would never have considered anybody on the right to have any kind of meaningful things to say about the working class or about politics generally. But a lot of people on the right now are saying that stuff, the stuff that the kind of left used to say. And many people on the many people on the left now are just towing the line of these old kind of right-wing ideas and legitimizing platforms like OnlyFans and Amazon and Facebook and Twitter, legitimizing the narrative that they want to feed to you. So, I mean, this is a long-winded way of saying, don't worry, I'm not on the right, but the right is saying some interesting stuff right now, and you should pay attention to that, even if you disagree with them, because I think engaging with people who you disagree with is so fundamental to developing a kind of ironclad political worldview.
Yeah, speaking of Twitter, so there was a fun
Good
tweet today.
segue.
This girl, I'm not going to say her name. She said, "I asked God to send me a man who will always love me, so He gave me a son and sent her some like baby pictures." And this person replies, "This is emotional incest. It's a very common relationship dynamic between traumatized parents and their kids. It is not your child's job to fill the void in your heart/ego. This generation is unhealthy and don't deserve babies seriously." You had some thoughts. What were your thoughts?
Oh, God.
I mean, excuse me. Children are actually private property in the market, and they do exist. Until they're old enough to sign up for their own OnlyFans, they're your emotional support, parasocial being.
I'd say that, quite frankly, many libertarians would say that there shouldn't be an age delineation for OnlyFans in the first place.
That's the main problem with OnlyFans. Yeah, libertarian critique.
Oh, God.
The market will provide.
Yeah. What is it? You were tweeting a bit about this notion of emotional incest to this person.
Okay. Yeah. What I was saying was that, I'm not a big fan of these kinds of expressions of authentic emotion, generally, like the initial tweet was, but I don't think that tweet was supposed to be some kind of like, oh, you're reading between the lines and you realize that, oh, this person has a very deep psychological trauma. But the response to that tweet, all I really said was that they're kind of, these kind of, very, woke and intersectional and very kind of, you could say academically informed, although I'd argue that they're not informed at all. They're just merely corrupted by the dogmas of neoliberal kind of philosophical thought. But like what I said was basically that this is a kind of this person is psychologizing somebody that they don't know. They're kind of reaching into that person and figuring out, or not even figuring out, just like contemplating what's wrong with them, what kind of, super deep interior trauma you have that you're expressing with this like just kind-hearted and wholesome tweet. And I think this kind of tendency towards psychologization in terms of like this kind of just a very kind of basic means by which a lot of people on social media operate right now is that they are kind of building this kind of grand narrative of all of these kind of posters and all of these Twitter posts that like they are trying to kind of be a therapeutic authority in a sense. They are trying to diagnose people. And again, not to bring up Lash, but he called this kind of the new therapeutic state. And he was referring specifically to the kind of transformation of the state in the 60s and 70s into this kind of bureaucratic and authoritative kind of mechanism where they had the capacity to, in terms of like, putting out social workers and stuff. And again, this is not an anti-social worker argument, but I'm just saying they were kind of overreaching into the kind of private familial lives of people. And, the whole system of foster care, the whole system of these kind of like seemingly benevolent, overarching kind of bureaucratic structures is very much alive and well in the minds of internet leftists. Like, these people do want to be the therapeutic state. These people do want to be this kind of bureaucratic structure, which is constantly diagnosing everything wrong with the world and constantly offering up these theories on why a particular person made a particular post. And again, individuating a problem, or not even a problem in most cases, individuating these things into like the privacy of the initial poster, right? Again, like, the Twitter medium is hard to talk about with this because I fucking hate using the word post. Like, a post is not a thing. It's not real. But like, I mean, it's the same thing with the kind of collapse of distance in a sense. And Byung-Chul Han, calls this kind of the growth of this kind of transparency, this social sphere where everybody is interconnected at all times and has access to everybody else's kind of interiority at all times. And I find that to be very dangerous because, this particular post is like stupid and harmless. Yeah. But it got like 1,600 likes the last I checked. And like, the fact that anybody considers this to be like constructive behavior in any way is just like, what the fuck is like wrong with these people? Like, why do you have to contemplate the psychological state of a person who you've never met and you probably will never meet and you don't know, who you're not friends with? Like, this is something that should be happening between friends and family members. This is not something you should go online and be diagnosed by somebody you've never met before. Like, it's just like, I don't know. It's just a kind of narcissistic compulsion, I think, that a lot of kind of Twitter leftists have.
Yeah. There's definitely like some psychotic mental health thing going on where like your natural inclination is to like shame a woman who just get a baby versus like, congratulations, which is the normal human response. But also, like, I think this therapy culture you've been talking a lot about really ties into like the rise of neoliberalism, and the point you made earlier about like blaming the individual for like their like reality in the world, like their suffering,
right,
or their or mistreatment of others, versus like acknowledging like, oh, maybe alienation and all these mental health things are all rising because of like a outside factor, which is like, if you're like a Marxist, is like relation to capital, and in many cases no one has any connection to capital anymore.
But it's funny that I would even take like a kind of strict behaviorist approach that would even be like, that's not a Marxist approach. There's just like a slightly older generation of psychology. It's bizarre to me that there are people who will have a hammer and sickle in their bio who will immediately reach for psychological interior states as the explanation for the world they see in front of them. And it's just a weird habit that neoliberalism and liberalism in general train us to do. It's it's a personal failing. You're not, you're disabled. It's not that you're not useful to capital, for example.
Right.
That's like, it's such a good little reframing you can always do. But the funniest example of this I've seen was, I've had people who are can be sort of smart materialists the rest of the time with like Trump brain. I'm diagnosing them with Trump brain. It's a syndrome. But talking about how, Trump was actually uniquely dangerous because he's a narcissist. They've designed that's and it's the bad thoughts in the head. And this has sort of become the project of not actually just the left or it's liberals across the political spectrum. They're left and right liberals, right? Engaged in a search for the bad thoughts in people's heads. And this person clearly had bad thoughts about being delighted about having a baby boy. How very dare they?
Yeah, I mean, that's a way better way to kind of describe it than I could. Like, honestly, if you're interested in kind of policing somebody's thoughts and emotions and desires, if you're interested in being a little foot soldier cop for the kind of neoliberal order and diagnosing people online of their problems, it's you who has a problem. It's not anybody else. Because at the end of the day, I think like we all have to have a kind of cogent sense of perspective in terms of where we all fall in this equation. And I think that the whole push to kind of going back to my first article that we discussed, the whole push for characterizing these fundamentally social problems, they wouldn't exist without society, into individual failings, is a trend that we should be totally resistant to, that we should not partake in that kind of behavior at all, and that we should just be cognizant of the kind of costs of it. Like, I mean, like going back to the whole idea of the kind of therapeutic state, like actually I read an article this morning about the kind of the organization, the charity rather, Mermaids in the UK, how they were able to influence basically whatever equivalent they have of child protective services over there. They were able to influence the state essentially to actually take a child from a parent's custody, because the parents were expressing reservations about, letting the child live as, whatever gender they wanted to. And, I understand if there was actual abuse going on, of course, you should have that state in place. But at the end of the day, like when you have this kind of confluence of the state apparatus and also the kind of private NGO sphere, the sphere of philanthropic, basically elite funded activism, it's a very bad combination in terms of its actual real world consequences, as progressive as these things are. And again, I don't know anything about mermaids. I'm not here to give a value judgment of the whole thing or whatever, but I really do think that, like, when you have these kind of professional activists dictating actual policy and dictating, like, for example, the person who responded to that tweet in the first place, that person, if they had a job in the NGO sector, they would be doing this stuff to real people with real consequences. Like, it's the same kind of social dynamics, the same kind of individuation, the same kind of focus on personal failings, the same kind of focus on individual psychology. It's a pretty disgusting thing. Like, why would you kind of take it upon yourself to diagnose someone? It's, quite frankly, just totally pointless and self-destructive. Honestly, I can't imagine this person is having happy thoughts in their downtime. Not to psychologize them too, but
oh no, we're free to. We're professionals around here. Yeah. No, I do think it's an interesting point, and it's one of the weird things I noticed between my sort of original entry into a self-serious and sort of dour kind of communist left
right.
when I was younger and in a different country, et cetera, and then being sort of immersed in a very extremely online left, is the belief that has that is totally mainstream, is that to simply be around somebody who is privately experiencing inside their head bad thoughts is actually dangerous, harmful, unsafe, corrosive to your moral fiber or something.
Right.
It is just to stand in the presence of bad thoughts, not bad thoughts being expressed. This is even I'm stopping short of even like this person said something I think is shitty. It's that I suspect this person has bad thoughts inside their head. I don't have any evidence of it, but I can sort of surmise from what they don't say, for example. And to be in the presence of that is intolerable.
Right.
It's a little weird.
It's very weird, and I think it goes to show like the kind of just fundamental degradation of even the notion of like kind of actually, like the Marxist part of me really agrees. Like it is a form of utopianism in the sense that, oh, this person's bad thoughts are going to spread by osmosis to the rest of the society, right? And everybody is guilty by association if they're even friends with this person. Like, I have lifelong friends who are MAGA guys, and I don't care about their fucking politics because they're my friends. Like I put that shit aside because fundamentally I have a relationship with them that's not mediated by these stupid kind of political things. I take my personal life more seriously than I take my quote unquote political life. And, I think this kind of goes to show how degraded the entire notion of a community is now, because usually a community meant you were in a physical proximate space with people who you shared something with, either a family or a workplace or even an apartment block or a housing tenement or whatever. But now this community is based on these, just totally facile, ascriptive identities like, like whatever, I'm half Arab, right? I'm half Syrian. And I have something in common with a half Syrian living, I don't know, in Germany, for example, or I don't have anything in common with that person because I don't know them. but the people who I have a community with are the people who I know and the people who I actually correspond with. And, just this kind of, racial essentialism and this kind of gender and sexual orientation essentialism is the way in which these dynamics manifest, kind of in the sphere of interpersonal relations. And it's totally destructive and totally antithetical to having a kind of real, universal, healthy society, which I think is something that anybody, whether you're a kind of populist right winger or whether you're a Marxist leftist, you have to have a conception of humanity that's universal and everybody's fundamentally entitled to the same, not necessarily the same lot in life, but the same kind of fundamental protections. They're entitled to dignity. They're entitled to basically a right to live and say the things that they want to. I think that's the whole idea of having a healthy public square in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we could talk forever, honestly, but I think we're hitting up time. Do you have any plugs you want to hit up, like your Patreon? Where can we find you on Twitter or whatever? Like, give us your plugs where people find you and support your podcast.
For sure. Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter @_self-optimizer. You can support System of Systems and, listen to System of Systems on patreon.com/System of Systems, where we have most of our episodes unlocked. So you don't even have to be a patron to listen to them. And you can find my own like writing on my website, diminishingexpectations.weebly.com. I have, poetry and fiction posted there. I don't only think about these political things. So, if you're interested in creative writing, you can check that out too and let me know what you think. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. This is a real blast.
Thank you, Ben. We really appreciate it. Go check out all those things. Go do the plugs. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.